Hello, my dear students. Welcome to Teacher at Home. Today, class, we are going to learn the third chapter, Electoral Politics. Overview. In chapter 1, we have seen that in the democracy, it is neither possible nor necessary for people to govern directly. The most common form of democracy in our times is for the people to govern through their representatives. In this chapter, we will look at how these representatives are elected. We begin by understanding why elections are necessary and useful in a democracy. We try to understand how electoral competition among parties serves the people. When they go on to ask what makes an election democratic, the best basic idea here is to distinguish democratic elections from non-democratic elections. The rest of the chapter tries to assess elections in India in the light of this yardstick. We took a look at each stage of elections from the drawing of boundaries of different constituencies of the declaration of results. At each stage, we ask what should happen and what does happen in elections. Towards the end of this chapter, we turn to an assessment of whether elections in India are free and fair. Here we also examine the role of the Election Commission in ensuring free and fair elections. Why elections? Assembly election in Haryana. The time is after midnight. An expectant crowd sitting for the past 5 years in a chunk of the town is waiting for its leader to come. The organizers assure and reassure the crowd that he would be here any moment. The crowd stands up whenever a passing vehicle comes that way. It arouses hopes that he has come. The leader is Mr. Devi Lal, the chief of the Haryana Sangharsh Samiti, who asked to address a meeting in Karnal on Thursday night. The 76-year-old leader is a very busy man these days. His day starts at 8 a.m. and ends after 11 p.m. Had already addressed 9 election meetings since morning, been constantly addressing public meetings for the past 23 months and preparing for his election. This newspaper report is about the state assembly election in Haryana in 1987. The state had been ruled by a Congress party led government since 1982. The Chaudhry Devi Lal, then an opposition leader, led a movement called Nyaya Yuddha, struggled for justice, and formed a new party, Lokdal. His party joined after opposition parties to form a front against the Congress in the elections. In the election campaign, Devi Lal said that if this party won the elections, his government would waive the loans of farmers and small businessmen. He promised that this would be the first action of this government. The people were unhappy with the existing government. They were also attracted by Devilal's promise. So when elections were held, they voted overwhelmingly in favor of Lokdal and his allies. Lokdal and his partners won 76 out of 90 seats in the state assembly. Lokdal alone won 60 seats and thus had a clear majority in the assembly. The Congress could win only 5 seats. Once election results were announced, the sitting chief minister resigned. The newly elected members of Legislative Assembly, MLAs of Lokdal, chose Devi Lal as their leader. The governor invited Devi Lal to be the new chief minister. 3 days after the election results were declared, he became the chief minister. As soon as he became the chief minister, his government issued a government order waiving the outstanding loans of small farmers, agriculture laborers, and small businessmen. His party ruled the state for 4 years. The next elections were held in 1991, but this time his party did not win popular support. The Congress won the election and formed the government. Next, why do we need elections? Elections take place regularly in any democracy. There are more than 100 countries in the world in which elections take place to choose people's representatives. We also read that elections are held in many countries that are not democratic. But why do we need elections? Let us try to imagine a democracy without elections. A rule of the people is possible without any elections if all the people can sit together every day and take all the decisions. But as we have already seen in chapter 1, this is not possible in any large community. Nor is it possible for everyone to have the time and knowledge to take decisions on all matters. Therefore, in most democracies, people rule through their representatives. Is there a democratic way of selecting representatives without elections? Let us think of Let us think of a place where representatives are selected on the basis of age and experience, or a place where they are chosen on the basis of education or knowledge. There could be some difficulty in deciding on which is more experienced or knowledgeable. But let us say the people can resolve these difficulties. Clearly, such a place does not require elections. But Can we call this place a democracy? How do we find out if people like their representatives or not? How do we ensure that these representatives rule as per the wish of the people? How to make sure that those who the people doesn't like to do not remain their representatives. This requires a mechanism by which people can choose their representatives at regular intervals and change them if they wish to do so. This mechanism is called election. Therefore, elections are considered essential in our times for any representative democracy. In an election, the voters make many choices. They can choose who will make laws for them. They can choose who will form the government and take major decisions. They can choose the party whose policies will guide the government and lawmaking. What makes an election democratic? Elections can be held in many ways. All democratic countries hold elections, but most non democratic countries also hold some kind of elections. How do we distinguish democratic elections from any other elections? We have discussed this question briefly in chapter first. We discussed many examples of countries where elections are held, but they cannot really be called democratic elections. Let us recall what we learned there and start with a simple list of the minimum conditions of a democratic election. First, everyone should be able to choose. This means that everyone should have one vote and every vote should have equal value. Second, there should be something to choose from. Parties and candidates should be free to contest elections and should offer some real choice of the voters. Third, the choice should be offered at regular intervals. Elections must be held regularly after every few years. Fourth, the candidate preferred by the people should get elected. Fifth, elections should be conducted in a free and fair manner where people can choose as they really wish. This might look like very simple and easy conditions, but there are many countries where these are not fulfilled. In this chapter, we will apply these conditions to the elections held in our own country to see if we can call these democratic elections. Is it good to have a political competition? Elections are thus all about political competition. This competition takes various forms. The most obvious form is the competition among political parties. At the constituency level, it takes the form of competition among several candidates. If there is no competition, election will become pointless. But is it good to have political competition? Clearly, an electoral competition has many demerits. It creates a sense of disunity and factionalizations in every locality. You would have heard of people complaining of party politics in your locality. Different political parties and leaders often level allegations against one another. Parties and candidates often use dirty tricks to win elections. Some people say that this pressure to win electoral fights does not allow sensible long term politics to be formulated. Some good people may wish to serve the country do not enter this arena. They do not like the idea of being dragged into unhealthy competition. Our constitution makers were aware of these problems, yet they opted for free competition in elections as a way to select our future leaders. They did so because this system works better in the long run. In an ideal world, all political leaders know what is good for the people and are motivated only by a desire to serve them. Political competition is not necessary in such an ideal world, but that is not what happens in real life. Political leaders all over the world, like all other professionals, are motivated by their desire to advance their political careers. They want to remain in power or to get power and positions for themselves. They may wish to serve the people as well, but it is risky to depend entirely on the sense of duty. Besides, even when they wish to serve the people, they may not know what is required to do so, or their ideas may not match what the people really want. How do we deal with this real life situation? One way is to try and improve the knowledge and character of political leaders. The other and more realistic way is to set up a system where political leaders are rewarded for serving the people and punished for not doing so. What decides this reward or punishment? The simple answer is the people. This is what electoral competition does. Regular electoral competition provides incentives to political parties and leaders. They know What if they raise issues that people want to be raised? Popularity and chances of victory will increase in the next elections, but if they fail to satisfy the voters with their work, they will not be able to win again. So, if a political party is motivated only by desire to be in power, even then it will be forced to serve the people. This is a bit like the way market works. Even if a shopkeeper is interested only in his profit, he is forced to give good service to the customers. If he doesn't, the customer will go to another shop. Similarly, political competition may cause divisions and some ugliness, but it finally helps to force political parties and leaders to serve the people. What is our system of elections? Can we say that Indian elections are democratic? To answer this question, let us take a look at how elections are held in India. Lok Sabha and Vidhan Sabha elections are held regularly after every 5 years. After 5 years, the term of all the elected representatives come to an end. The Lok Sabha or Vidhan Sabha stands dissolved. Elections are held in all constituencies at the same time, either on the same day or within a few days. This is called general elections. Sometimes elections is held only for one constituency to fill the vacancy caused by the death or the resignation of a member. This is called a by-election. In this chapter, we will focus on general elections. Electoral constituencies. You have read about the people of Haryana electing 90 MLAs. You may have wondered how they did that. Did every person in Haryana vote for all the 90 MLAs? You perhaps know that this is not the case. In our country, we follow an area-based system on representation. Country is divided into different areas for purpose of elections. These areas are called electoral constituencies. The voters who live in an area elect one representatives. For Lok Sabha elections, the country is divided into 543 constituencies. Representative elected from each constituency is called a member of the parliament or an MP. One of the features of a democratic election is that every vote should have equal value. That is why our constitution requires that each constituency should have a roughly equal population living within it. Similarly, each state is divided into a specific number of assembly constituencies. In this case, the elected representatives is called the member of legislative assembly or an MLA. Each parliamentary constituency has within it several assembly constituencies. The same principle applies for panchayat and municipal elections. Panchayat and municipal elections. Each village or town is divided into several wards that are like constituencies. Each ward elects one member of the village or the urban local body. Sometimes the constituencies are counted as seats for each constituency represents one seat in the assembly. When we say that Lokdal 160 seats in Haryana, it means the candidates of Lokdal 1 in 60 assembly constituencies in the state, and thus Lokdal had 60 MLAs in the state assembly. Reserved constituencies. Our constitution entitles every citizen to elect her or his representative and to be elected as a representative. The constitution makers, however, worried that in the open electoral competition, certain weaker sections may not stand in a good chance to get elected to the Lok Sabha and the state legislative assemblies. They may not have the required resources, education, and contacts to contest and win election against others. Those who are influential and resourceful may prevent them from winning elections. If that happens, our parliament and assemblies would be derived of the voice of the significant section of our population that would make our democracy less representative and less democratic. So the makers of our constitution thought of a special system of reserved constituencies for the weaker sessions. Some constituencies are reserved for people who belong to the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes. In a SC reserved constituency, only someone who belongs to the scheduled caste can stand for election. Similarly, those belonging to the scheduled tribe can contest an election from a constituency reserved for ST. Currently, in the Lok Sabha, 84 seats are reserved for the scheduled caste and 47 for the scheduled tribe. As on 26 January 2019, this number is in proportion to their share in the total population. Thus, the reserved seats of SC and ST do not take away the legitimate share of any other social group. This system of reservation was extended later to other weaker sessions at the district and local level. In many states, seats in the rural, that is the panchayat and urban municipalities and corporations, local bodies are now reserved for other backward classes OBC as well. However, the proportion of seats reserved varies from state to state. Similarly, one-third of the seats are reserved in rural and urban local bodies for women candidates. Voters list. Once the constituencies are decided, the next step is to decide who can and who cannot vote. This decision cannot be left to anyone till the last day. In a democratic election, the list of those who are eligible to vote is prepared much before the election and given to everyone. This list is officially called Electoral Roll and is commonly known as voters list. This is an important step, for it is linked to the first condition of a democratic election. Everyone should get an equal opportunity to choose representatives. Earlier we read about the principle of universal adult franchise. In practice, it means that everyone should have one vote and each vote should have equal value. No one should be denied the right to vote without a good reason. Different citizens differ from one another in many ways. Some are rich, some are poor, some are highly educated, some are not so educated or not educated at all. Some are kind, others are not so kind, but all of them are human beings with their own needs and views. That is why all of them deserve to have an equal say in decisions that affect them. In our country, all the citizens aged 18 years and above can vote in the election. Every citizen has the right to vote regardless of his or her caste, religion or gender. Some criminals and persons with unsound mind and here is the states and union territories, state constituencies and union territories also given here. You have to read that. Be denied the right to vote, but only in rare situations. It is the responsibility of the government to get the names of all the eligible voters, but on the voters list. As new persons attaining voting age names are added to the voters list, name of those who moved out of the place or those who are dead or deleted. Complete revisions of the list take place every 5 years. This is done to ensure that it remains up to date. The last few years, a new system of election photo identity card has been introduced. The government has tried to give this card to every person on the voters list. Voters are required to carry this card when they go out to vote so that no one can vote for someone else. But this card is not yet compulsory for voting. For voting, the voters can show how many other proofs of identity like the ration card or the driving license. Nomination of candidates. We noted above that in a democratic election, people should have a real choice. This happens only when there are almost no restrictions on anyone to contest an election. This is what our system provides. Anyone who can be a voter can also become a candidate in elections. The only difference is that in order to be a candidate, the minimum age is 25 years, while it is only 18 years for being a voter. There are some other restrictions on criminals, but these apply in very extreme cases. Political parties nominate their candidates who get the party symbol and support parties. Nomination is often called a ticket. Every person who wishes to contest an election has to fill a nomination form and give some money as security deposit. Recently, a new system of declaration had been introduced on direction from the Supreme Court. Every candidate has to make a legal declaration giving full details of serious criminal cases depending against the candidate, details of the assets and liabilities of the candidate and his or her family, and educational qualifications of the candidate. This information has to be made public. This provides an opportunity to the voters to make their decisions on the basis of their information provided by the candidates. So this is the form that has to be filled up. Educational qualifications for candidates. Why is there no educational qualifications for holding such an important position when some kind of educational qualification is needed for any other job in the country? Educational qualifications are not relevant to all kind of jobs. Relevant qualifications for selections to the Indian cricket team, for example, is not the attainment of education degrees, but the ability to play cricket well. Similarly, the relevant education Qualification for being an MLA or an MP is the ability to understand people's concerns, problems, and to represent their interest. Whether they can do so or not is examined by lakhs of examiners, their voters, after every 5 years. Even if education was relevant, it should be left to the people to decide how much importance they give to educational qualifications. In our country, putting an educational qualifications would go against the spirit of democracy for yet another reason. It would mean depriving a majority of the country's citizens the right to contest elections. If, for example, a degree like BA, BCom, BSc was made compulsory for candidates, more than 90% of the citizens will become ineligible for contest elections. So this is the form that has to be filled up. Okay, it belongs to Mizoram. Principles, universal adult franchise, features of electoral system. Each constituency has roughly the same population. Representation of equal sessions. Everyone who is 18 years of age or older has the right to vote. Open political competition. Anyone can form a party to contest elections. One vote, one value. Reservation of seats for the SC and STs. Election campaign. The main purpose of an election is to give people a chance to choose the representatives, the government, and the policy they prefer. Therefore, it is necessary to have a free and open discussion about who is a better representative, which party will make a better government, or what is a good policy. This is what happens during election campaign. In our country, such campaign take place for 2 week period between the announcement of the final list of candidates and the date of polling. During this period, the candidate contact their voters, political leaders address elections meetings and political parties mobilize their supporters. It is also the period when newspaper and television news are full of election-related stories and debates. But election campaign is not limited to these 2 weeks only. Political parties start preparing for elections months before they actually take place. In election campaigns, political parties try to focus public attention on some big issues. They want to attract the public to that the issue and get them to vote to the party of the basis. Let us look at some of the successful slogans given by different political parties in various elections. The Congress party led by Indira Gandhi gave the slogan of Garibi Hatao in the Lok Sabha elections of 1971. The party promised to reorient all the policies of the government to remove poverty from the country. Save Democracy was the slogan given by Janata Party under the leadership of Jayaprakash Narayan. In the Lok Sabha election held in 1977, the party promised of undo the excess committed during the emergency and restore civil liberties. The left front used the slogan of land to the tiller in the West Bengal Assembly elections held in 1977. Protest the self-respect of the Telugus was the slogan used by N.T. Ramarao, the leader of the Telugu Desam Party in the Andhra Pradesh Assembly elections in 1983. In a democracy, it is best to leave the political parties and candidates free to conduct the election campaigns the way they want to, but it is sometimes necessary to regulate campaigns to ensure that every political party and candidate get a fair and equal chance to compete. According to our election law, no party or candidate can bribe or threaten voters. Bribe or threaten voters. Appeal to them in the name of caste or religion. Use government resources for election campaign and spend more than 25 lakh in a constituency for a Lok Sabha election or rupees 10 lakh in a constituency in an assembly election. If they do so, the election can be rejected by the court even after they have been declared unelected. In addition to the laws, all the political parties in our country have agreed to the model code of conduct for election campaigns. According to this, no party or candidate can use any place of worship for election propaganda. Under use government vehicles, aircraft, and officials for elections, and once elections are announced, ministers shall not lay foundations, stones of any projects, take any big policy decisions, or make any promises providing public facilities. Polling and counting of votes. The final stage of an election is the day when the voters cast or poll their vote. That day is usually called the election day. Every person whose name is on the voters list can go to nearby polling booth situated usually in a local school or a government office. Once the voter goes inside the booth, election officials identify her, put a mark on her finger, allow her to cast her vote. An agent of each candidate is allowed to sit inside the polling booth, ensure that the voting take place in a fair way. Are the elections too expensive for our country? A large amount of money is spent in conducting elections in India. For instance, the government spent about rupees 3,500 crores in conducting Lok Sabha elections in 2014. That works out about rupees 40 per person on the voters list. The amount spent by parties and candidates were more than that the government spent. Roughly speaking, the expenditure made by government parties candidates was around rupees 30,000 crores or rupees 500 per voter. Some people say the elections are a burden on our people, and our poor country cannot afford to hold elections once every 5 years. Let us compare this expenditure with some of the figures. 2005, our government decided to buy 6 nuclear submarines from France. Each submarine cost about rupees 3,000 crores. Delhi hosted the Commonwealth Games in 2010. The estimate for this cost is around rupees 20,000 crores. Are the elections too expensive? You decide. Election result in Gulbarga. Let us go back to our examples of Gulbarga in 2014. A total of 8 candidates contested elections in that constituency. The total eligible voters were 17.21 lakhs. Of this, 9.98 lakh voters had cast their votes. Candidates of the Congress party, Mallikarjun Kharge, secured about 5.07 lakh votes. This was 50.82% of the total votes polled. But since he had secured more votes than anyone else, he was declared elected member of parliament from Gulbarga Lok Sabha constituency. Earlier, the voters used to indicate who they wanted to vote for putting a stamp on the ballot paper. A ballot paper is a sheet of paper on which the names of the contesting candidates along with the party name and symbols are listed. Nowadays, electronic voting machines are used to record votes. The machine shows the names of the candidates and the party symbols. Independent candidates too have their own symbols allotted by Election Commission. All that the voter has to do is to press the button against the name of the candidate she wants to give her vote. Once the polling is over, all the EVMs are sealed and taken to a secure place. A few days later, on a fixed date, all the EVMs from a constituency are opened and the votes secured by each candidate are counted. Agents of all candidates are present there to ensure that the counting is done properly. The candidate who secures the highest number of votes from a constituency is declared elected in a general election. Usually the counting of votes in all the constituencies take place at the same time on the same day. Television channels, radio and newspapers report this event. Within a few hours of counting, all the results are declared and it becomes clear as to whom will form the next government. What makes election in India democratic? We get to read a lot about unfair practices in elections. Newspaper and television report often refer to such allegations. Most of these reports are about the following: inclusion of false names and exclusion of genuine names in the voters list, misuse of government facilities and officials by the ruling party, excessive use of money by rich candidates and big parties, and intimidations of voters and rigging of the polling day. Many of these reports are correct. We feel unhappy when we read or see such reports, but fortunately they are not on such a scale so as to defeat that very purpose of elections. This becomes clear if we ask a basic question: can a party win an election and come to power not because it has popular support but through electoral malpractices? This is a vital question. Let us carefully examine various aspects of this question. Independent Election Commission. One simple way of checking whether elections are fair or not is to look at who conduct the elections. Are they independent of the government? Or can the government or the ruling party influence or pressurize them? Do they have enough powers to be able to conduct free and fair elections? Do they actually use these powers? Answer to all these questions is quite positive for our country. In our country, elections are conducted by an independent and very powerful election commission. It enjoys the same kind of independence that the judiciary enjoys. The Chief Election Commissioner (ECE) is appointed by the President of India. But once appointed, the Chief Election Commissioner is not answerable to the President or to the government. Even if the ruling party of the government does not like what the Commission does, it is virtually impossible for it to remove the CEC. Very few election commissions in the world have very such wide-ranging powers as the Election Commission of India. ECE takes the decisions on every aspect of control of elections, from the announcement of the elections to the declaration of results. It implements the code of conduct and punishes any candidate or party that violates it. During the election period, EC can order the government to follow some guidelines to prevent use and misuse of governmental power to enhance its chances to win elections or to transfer some government officials. When on election duty, government officers work under the control of EC and not the government. In the last 25 years or so, Election Commission has begun to exercise all its powers and even expand them. It is very common now for the Election Commission to reprimand the government and administration for their lapses. When election officials came to the opinion that polling was not fair in some booths or even an entire constituency, they ordered a repoll. Ruling parties often do not like the EC does, but they have to obey. This would not have happened if the EC was not independent and powerful. Popular participation. Another way to check the quality of the election process is to see whether people participate in it with enthusiasm. If the election process is not fair or free or fair, the people will not continue to participate in the exercise. Now read these charts and draw some conclusions about the participation in India. People's participation in election is usually measured by voter turnout figures. Turnout indicators the percent of eligible voters who actually cast their vote. Over the last 50 years, the turnout in Europe and North America has declined. In India, the turnout has either remained stable or actually gone up. In India, the poor, illiterate, and unprivileged people vote in larger proportion as compared to the rich and privileged sections. This is in contrast to Western democracies. For example, in the United States of America, poor people, African Americans, and Hispanics vote much less than the rich and the white people. Common people in India take a lot of importance of elections. They feel that through elections they can bring pressure on political parties to adopt policies and program favorable to them. They also feel that their vote matters in the way things are run in the country. The interest of voters in election-related activities has been increasing over the years. During the 2014-2004 elections, more than one-third voters took part in the campaign-related activities. More than half of the people identified themselves as being close to one or the other political party. 1 out of every 7 voters is a member of the political party. Acceptance of election outcome. A final test of the free and fairness of election has to be outcome itself. If elections are not fair, free or fair, the outcome always favors the powerful. Such a situation, ruling parties do not lose elections. Usually, losing party does not accept the outcome of a rigged election. Outcome of India's election speaks for itself. Ruling parties routinely lose elections in India, both at the national and state level. In fact, in every 2 out of the 3 elections held in the last 25 years, ruling party lost. In the US, an incumbent or sitting elected representatives rarely loses an election. In India, about half of the sitting MPs or MLAs lose elections. Candidates who are known to have spent a lot of money buying votes and those with non-criminal connections often lose elections. Barring very few disrupted elections, the electoral outcomes are usually accepted as people's verdict by the defeated party. Challenges to free and fair elections. All this lead to a simple conclusion: elections in India are basically free and fair. The party that wins an election and forms government does so because people have chosen it over its rivals. This may not be true of every constituency. A few candidates may win purely on the basis of money, power, and fair means. But the overall verdict of a general election still reflects popular preference. There are very few exceptions to this rule in the last 60 years in our country. This is what makes the Indian elections democratic. Yet the picture looks different. If we ask deeper questions, are people's preferences based on real knowledge? Are the voters getting a real choice? Is election really level playing field for everyone? Can an ordinary citizen hope to win elections? Questions of this kind bring the many limitations and challenges of Indian elections to our attention. These include candidates and parties with a lot of money may be sure of their victory, but they do enjoy a big and unfair advantage over smaller parties and independents. In some parts of the country, candidates with criminal connections have been able to push others out of the electoral race and secure a ticket from major parties. Some families tend to dominate political parties. The tickets are distributed to relatives from these families. Very often elections offer little choice to other citizens, ordinary citizens, for both the major parties are quite similar to each other both in policies and practice. Smaller parties and independent candidates suffer a huge disadvantage compared to bigger parties. These challenges exist not just in India, but also in many established democracies. These deeper issues are a matter of concern for those who believe in democracy. That is why citizens, social activities, and organizations have been demanding reforms in our electoral system. Can you think of some reforms? What can an ordinary citizen do to face these challenges? Code of Conduct, a set of norms and guidelines to be followed by political parties and contesting candidates during election time. Constituency, voters in geographical area who elect a representative to the legislative bodies. Incumbent, the current holder of a political office. Usually the choice for the voters in election is between the incumbent party of candidate and those who oppose them. Level playing field, condition in which all parties and candidates contesting in an election have equal opportunities to appeal for votes and to carry out election campaign. Rigging, fraud and malpractices indulged by a party or candidate to increase its votes. It includes stuffing ballot boxes by a few persons using the votes of others, recording multiple votes by the same person, and bribing to causing polling officers to favor a candidate. Turnout, the percentage of eligible voters who cast their votes in an election. So that's all about this chapter. If you're interested, please do like, share, and subscribe my channel. Okay, thank you.